Today, I want to finally address this. This was an amazing post-credit scene that I didn't actually know existed until after I made my first video on the new episode. But even then, I wanted to take some time before talking about theories surrounding what is happening here, as most people think it's not just Caine losing his mind, but also abstracting. This is a crazy theory, because as far as we know, only humans abstract and Caine is not human. Or is he? I have some theories, so let's talk about why I think Caine is really abstracting here and how he might actually have been human before entering the circus like the others. I'm a little late to the game on Caine videos this week, so let me know if anyone else had this kind of idea in their theory videos before. Now to start, this theory is that Caine isn't just falling apart, but rather is actually abstracting the same way we've seen human-type characters do in the past. Which, as I said before, is interesting because as far as we know, only humans can abstract. To most, Caine isn't abstracting, but he's just doing what the fandom calls glitching, falling apart due to multiple reasons within the game. The game is kind of buggy to begin with, and I can't imagine there was any sort of playtesting that explored what would happen if the game ran for months or years at a time, particularly with humans trapped inside of it full time. But one really interesting thing is that Caine glitching out is done at a point where he experiences two things that tend to come together when someone abstracts. First, the most obvious thing that hurts a person and pushes them towards abstraction appears to be a distressed emotional state. This makes sense as the digital circus avatars are human minds trapped in digital forms. The long-standing theory is that the uniqueness of the avatar is specifically designed so that the person's mind can fit into it, and when that mind experiences extreme distress, that form may simply shatter itself. We know this happened to Kaufma when he abstracted, as he became emotionally different over several days before his abstraction. This also appears to be what Gangle was going through near the end of episode 4 when she began blurring and blacking out, and Jax even seemed to go through this at the end of episode 6. And we see this with Caine in some of his more intense glitching moments as well. I think the most obvious example of this is in episode 3 when the gang is on their adventure and Caine is talking to Zooble. Here, Caine is having a meltdown over Zooble not wanting to participate in the adventures that Caine designed. But to me, emotional distress is only half of the equation. The other half being, I think, that the character needs to be losing their sense of identity. This can obviously be very tied to your emotional state or even directly tied in all of these cases, but it's the concept of the character's identity that is really important here, I think. These avatars look like they're a reflection of their characters' minds. Ragatha is a ragdoll because she takes a beating, Pomni always feels like she's ridiculous and being looked at like a clown, Zooble can customize their self because of their dysphoria, and Gangle's comedy and drama mask represent the extremes of their emotional jumps, with the happy mask generally covering the sad mask to hide that she is crying. The point is here that the characters are reflections of their minds in real life, not their bodies, and as we said before, they seem to be designed to fit only the person that they are modeled after. I don't believe that you can just put on the headset and choose someone else's character's save file to play in this game. It always has to be an avatar that is built based around you. And this is why your sense of identity is so important. Identity is something in real life that is considered malleable in both subtle and overt ways, and it's obvious that aspects of who we are do change over time. In the digital circus, I imagine that if you scanned yourself as a child to play the game and scanned yourself again as an adult, it would create very different avatars to model itself after you. Heck, if you play the game regularly, it may be rescanning and adjusting your character as you go in, due to how much even a kid can change over time in between playing the game. But I also wouldn't be surprised if people who hadn't played the game in years go back and find that their character is no longer playable because they are no longer the person they were before. And with that in mind, if you were somehow to go through extreme changes in the digital circus, this would cause a disconnect between the mind and the digital avatar designed to contain it. Though I do want to say it does appear that some minor changes can be accommodated. But ultimately, this is why the characters abstract, I think, because they lose their sense of self in a way that is emotionally damaging. Jax indicates this in episode 6 when he says that people who abstract aren't pleasant to be around in the days leading up to it, indicating that they aren't just acting crazy, but acting really emotionally different. The hidden story within episode 6 appears to be that Jax accidentally caused Ribbit to abstract by corrupting them, as Ragatha said. We see Jax do this a bit with Pomni when he convinced her that they aren't humans, but instead are just archetypes. And in a way, he is correct, but not in the way that matters. Of course, they are still human minds, and I made a long video discussing the importance of acknowledging that. But to some degree, even positive growth might cause someone to abstract. It's not just losing a sense of self that seems to do it, but the sense of self that was scanned into the circus. Some amount of emotional or personal growth does seem to happen in the game, but at some point the idea of who you are doesn't just reflect your avatar and can't be altered. With Zooble, we can see some alteration and customization is allowed, not just with their own interchangeable parts that they came into the circus with, or the parts that Caine gave them either, but according to Gooseworks, Zooble also explored random things in the circus that could be swapped out from their existing parts. Jax, meanwhile, claims to have had a tail previously, but by episode 5 this tail is missing, and then in episode 6 he suddenly has one again, but in a different shape. And if I had to guess, this goes down to the character's mindset. Kinger indicated in the episode that the characters actually have more control over the game than they think, as he was able to simply think of a solution to Ragatha's problem and give her an extra health point. And with that in mind, it seems to me at least that Jax's tail disappeared when he was talking about how masculine it made him, because in that episode he wasn't feeling very masculine. The entire episode was more about how the rest of the gang was turning against him, and eventually they even put him in a maid uniform, which is absolutely not masculine for him. And it makes sense that throughout the episode, if he wasn't feeling like his strongest self, a certain symbol of his masculinity, like his tail, would suddenly disappear. But my theory is that abstraction is what happens when these changes go far beyond what the original character was scanned for. With Pomni, she is such a nice and sweet person that forcing her to act evil over time would unalign her with her model and make her abstract, I think. And this is what Ragatha and Jax hint at having happened to Ribbit, with Ragatha being worried that the same thing would happen to Pomni, and Jax agreeing enough to put distance between him and Pomni because of it. The point is that it's an identity shift away from your core that seems to lead to a character abstracting, and this seems to be what is happening to Caine, even when he's not in a directly emotionally distressed state. I think this was best explored in episode 5 when Caine gave in to the characters and let them each choose their own adventures, which the characters ended up enjoying more than Caine's adventures. Caine's adventures are more meant for children with lots of excitement and energy, whereas Pomni and the gang are adults who would prefer to spend their days in more leisurely and social situations. The problem is that Caine can't take this advice to heart, as he's programmed not just to create, but to create exciting things that make characters respond with excitement. In the end, Caine cannot handle the characters not enjoying the games that he creates, as he has his own mind that wants to make things as epic and exciting as possible. And even just being expected to tailor to the humans' needs directly is something that hurts his identity. Over time, it simply causes him to start glitching out, and if the post-credit scene is any indication, he may just abstract soon. The question is, how can Caine abstract if he is an NPC instead of a human character? I think a sophisticated enough NPC may honestly be able to abstract or glitch out in a similar way. But for this theory, I want to focus on the idea that Caine is in fact a human brain in a video game form. Now, we literally know that this is possible, at least before any big twists reveal otherwise, as our main 6 characters are all human minds that are trapped inside a video game. The technology exists within this game to have human brains stuck inside of it, operating without a human in a headset. We as the audience interpret this as a glitch, and the exact way it's happened with our characters probably is, but that doesn't mean it wasn't an intended part of its original programming. This glitch likely isn't a malfunction of the game's core functions, but just an accidental overlap of those functions, which is something a lot more common with glitches than just something random happening, especially with older video games. What I'm trying to say here is that in order to create the character of Caine, I think a real human had to be scanned into the game, as it was the only way to create something sophisticated enough in order to contend with humans in what they want. This doesn't mean Caine isn't also an NPC, as NPC just means non-player character, and he's not a player character. But instead, I think every copy of the digital circus has a copy of one person's brain who is acting out as Caine in order to create the game for each person. Caine himself appears to be named after a real human, and a human who designed the game named Caine. All the way back in the pilot, we knew that there was an important C and A logo behind the digital circus game, with most fans rightly assuming that the C and A stood for Cain and Abel. I say rightly because in episode 6, the guns that Caine created all had the branding saying Cain and Abel, confirming finally that this is what the C and A stood for. These are the names of the first 2 sons of Adam and Eve in the Bible, indicating the game was made by 2 brothers who represented themselves in their work with the characters of Cain and Bubble. Bubble himself appears to just be a creation of this Caine in particular, and there's no evidence that other copies of the digital circus come with a Bubble character. And instead, Caine seems to have created Bubble in order to be his sidekick and someone he can talk to, someone the real Caine might want to make if he had missed Abel. And so I believe that Caine is actually just a scan of the real Caine's brain set loose in the circus. If this is something the other characters can do by accident, it's likely due to this being part of how the game was made, with a version of Caine thinking he is just an AI programmer in the digital circus and having no memory of his life beforehand. We get hints of the idea of a real-life human Caine in the digital circus game commercial that used to be available on the Wacky Watch website, where the person advertising the game, like its creator, is dressed like Caine. The whole point of the digital circus as a game seemed to be extreme whimsy without care, and because of that, without proper safety, it would make sense that the creator would only see himself within the game being the one to create the adventures for others. Caine's desire to be loved in the game likely is reflected by the real Caine's desire to be seen as a groundbreaking artistic creator with an ambitious video game. But this leads to a very flawed person needing validation being the one in charge of the video game. And over time, with a video game left running, this figure would corrupt and eventually possibly even abstract. The most recent episode had Caine freaking out about not being the winner of the favorite character awards, something that had a lot of fake drama behind the scenes, with Caine posting on the Glitch YouTube channel about the awards and his clear dissatisfaction with them. What Caine wants is to be the cool character, the one everyone worships, and when he doesn't get that and he realizes his adventures aren't beloved, he would lose his identity and I think abstract. And part of what makes this so sad is the characters are focusing so much on making sure the others don't abstract because of some sort of emotional distress, that they don't realize Caine needs this too, that just being in charge doesn't mean he's so important that he doesn't need to be taken care of as well. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.
Deepcut? What are you doing right now?